I'm Emily, 35, and if you'd asked me a few years ago, I'd have told you my life was just about perfect. I was climbing the corporate ladder at a renowned company, making my way to a department manager position. It was during those long hours at work that I stumbled upon something unexpected, something that wasn't part of my meticulously planned career path: love. His name was Jake, a colleague from a different department. He wasn't as high up on the career ladder as I was, but that never mattered to me. Our connection was instant, and before we knew it, our office romance blossomed into something deeper, leading us down the aisle. The company we worked for was supportive. After all, it wasn't a secret affair, but a serious relationship that everyone could see was genuine. We were happy, living in a beautiful, spacious house that we bought together. It was more than a home. It was a symbol of our future, of the family we dreamed of starting. But our seemingly perfect life wasn't without its cracks. The main issue: our earnings. I always earned more than Jake, and while it never bothered me, it was a thorn in his side. One chilly evening, as we sat in our living room, Jake brought it up yet again. Does it ever get to you, the whole money thing?" he asked, his gaze fixed on the dancing flames in the fireplace. "No, Jake, it really doesn't. I love you, not your paycheck. We're in this together, remember?" I replied, trying to reassure him. He let out a long sigh. "I just feel like I should be the one bringing in more, you know? It's not traditional." I reached for his hand, giving it a gentle squeeze. "We're not a traditional couple, Jake. We make our own rules. We're happy, aren't we?" He nodded, but his eyes didn't mirror the conviction in his voice. The topic was a recurring one, resurfacing every now and then, each time leaving a faint but lingering unease in the air. Life has a way of throwing you off course when you least expect it. That's exactly what happened to me, Emily, on a seemingly ordinary Tuesday. It was supposed to be a routine medical checkup, nothing more. I sat there in the sterile doctor's office, fidgeting with the hem of my shirt, waiting for the usual all clear. Instead, what I got was a jolt that turned my world upside down. The doctor, a kind-faced woman in her 50s, had a serious look as she delivered the news. "Emily, I'm sorry to tell you this, but you have cancer," she said gently. For a moment, everything stood still. The word cancer echoed in my head like a dreadful bell. Fear, disbelief, a sense of unreality washed over me. What? Are you sure?" I managed to stammer, feeling my heart pounding in my chest. The doctor nodded, her expression empathetic. "I understand this is a lot to take in. We need to discuss your treatment options." Her voice faded into the background as I grappled with the shock. Cancer? Me? It didn't make sense. I was healthy, or so I thought. When I left the doctor's office, I felt like I was in a daze. The world seemed to go on around me, but I was stuck in that moment of devastating revelation. I called Jake as soon as I could. He answered after a few rings. "Hey, Em, how did the checkup go?" His voice was casual, expecting routine news. "Jake, it's not good," I said, my voice shaky. "What's wrong? Talk to me, Em," he replied, his tone shifting to concern. I have cancer, Jakey. I have cancer." There was a heavy silence on the other end. Then, "Oh God, Em, I'm so sorry. Are you okay? Where are you?" "I'm still at the clinic. I'm not okay, Jakey. I'm scared," I admitted, feeling a lump forming in my throat. "I'll come right over. We'll face this together. You're not alone," he said firmly. Hearing his words, a small flicker of hope ignited within me. Maybe, just maybe, we could get through this nightmare together. The following days were a blur of appointments, tests, and consultations. I started my treatment, which included chemotherapy. It was exhausting, both physically and emotionally. Jake was supportive at first, accompanying me to my sessions, holding my hand, trying to be strong for both of us. But as the treatments took a toll on me, I noticed a change in Jake. His visits became less frequent. His reassurances felt more forced. Whenever I asked him why he couldn't come, he always had the same excuse. Work is just crazy right now, Em. I'm so tired by the end of the day, he'd say over the phone. I tried to understand, to be sympathetic. After all, he was dealing with this in his own way too. But deep down, I couldn't shake off the feeling of growing distance, the creeping sense of loneliness that started to envelop me. In those moments of solitude and struggle, I found an unexpected source of strength, my parents and my best friend, Lisa. They were my rocks, calling me daily, visiting me whenever they could, offering words of encouragement and love. While I was trying to adjust to my new reality in the hospital, undergoing treatment and dealing with the side effects, life outside continued. I missed our home, the comfort of our bed, the little rituals Jake and I had. Despite his decreasing visits, I clung to the hope that we were still a team. One day, Lisa came to visit. She brought some magazines, my favorite snacks, and a sense of normalcy that I craved. But there was something off about her. She seemed uneasy. Hey, what's up? You seem a bit distracted, I said, trying to read her expression. Lisa hesitated before speaking. Emily, I don't want to worry you, but something strange happened the other day. My heart skipped a beat. What happened? Well, I was walking past your house and I heard laughter. Loud female laughter. It sounded like there was a party or something, she said cautiously. A cold shiver ran down my spine. A party? But Jake didn't mention anything. Maybe he had friends over. Lisa bit her lip, looking uncomfortable. I don't know, Emily. It just felt weird and I haven't seen Jake around much lately. I'm worried there might be someone else. Her words hit me like a ton of bricks. I didn't want to believe it, but the seeds of doubt were planted. Was Jake seeing someone else while I was stuck here fighting for my life? I need to know, Lisa. I can't just sit here wondering, I said, a sense of urgency rising within me. I understand, but what are you going to do? Lisa asked, her concern evident. I need to go home. I need to see for myself, I decided, my mind made up. But Emily, your treatment. I know, but I can't ignore this. I have to know the truth, I interrupted, feeling a mix of anger, betrayal, and fear. Lisa helped me arrange for an early discharge. The doctors weren't thrilled, but my recent results were promising, and they agreed under the condition that I would continue my treatment on an outpatient basis. The drive home was nerve-wracking. Every possible scenario played out in my mind. I was scared of what I might find, yet I needed answers. As we pulled up to the house, everything looked normal from the outside, but the moment we stepped in, it was clear something was off. The place felt different, like it wasn't ours anymore. We heard voices coming from the living room. My heart pounded in my chest as we walked in, bracing for what we might find. To my utter shock, there was a couple sitting there, looking as surprised to see us as we were to see them. Who are you? What are you doing in my house? I demanded, my voice trembling with a mixture of anger and disbelief. The woman, probably in her late 30s, stood up. I'm sorry, but who are you? We're renting this place. Renting? This is my house. I live here with my husband, Jake, I said, struggling to process her words. The man, who had been quiet until now, spoke up. We've been here for a couple of weeks. We made a deal with Jake, he said. He said the house was going to be sold, and we were interested in buying it. My world came crashing down at that moment. Not only was there another woman in my house, but now I was being told that my husband, the man I trusted, was planning to sell our home without my knowledge. I felt like I was in a nightmare, one that I couldn't wake up from. As I stood in the living room of what was once a symbol of our shared dreams, the couple who had unwittingly walked into this mess looked at me with a mix of confusion and pity. They introduced themselves as Mark and Sandra, clearly uncomfortable, but trying to be polite. I could hardly focus on their words. My mind was in turmoil. Please, can you call Jake? I need to speak to him, I said, my voice shaky but firm. Mark nodded, taking out his phone. Of course, I have his number, he said, offering to call if we needed anything. The wait for Jake to arrive was agonizing. My heart raced with a cocktail of emotions: anger, betrayal, disbelief. When he finally walked in, the look on his face was one of shock, but not the kind I expected. Emily, what are you doing here? You should be in the hospital, he said, his voice tinged not with concern, but annoyancy. His reaction only fueled my anger. What am I doing here, Jake? What are you doing selling our house behind my back? I demanded. He had the audacity to look irritated. I can explain, Emily. It's simple, really. Explain? Explain how you could betray me like this? My voice was rising, despite my efforts to control it. Listen, Emily, you're sick. The cancer might not even go away. I have to think about my life, too. I can't be tied down, waiting for whatever comes next, he said callously. I felt like I had been slapped. His words were cruel, unrecognizable from the man I thought I knew. You're talking about selling our home, our life together, as if it's just a transaction. Is this really you, Jake? Disbelief and hurt were evident in my voice. He shrugged, a cold look in his eyes. It's practical, Emily. You're not going to make it, and I need the money to build my life. Besides, I would get this house anyway if, His words were like a knife twisting in my gut. The reality of his betrayal was worse than any suspicion I had harbored. I can't believe you, Jake. After everything, this is what it comes down to? Money and convenience? I was struggling to hold back tears. Jake seemed unfazed. Life goes on, Emily. Yours might not, but mine will. I need to think about my future, he said, his brazenness leaving me speechless. I'll fight you on this, Jake, and the company will hear about how you treat your sick wife. You won't get away with this, I said, feeling a surge of resolve amidst the chaos of my emotions. He scoffed. Do what you want, Emily. I'm done here. With that, he turned and left, leaving a trail of coldness behind. I stood there, shaken to my core, realizing that the man I loved was a stranger to me now. I knew at that moment that this was a battle I had to fight, not just for my health, but for justice and dignity. After Jake left, a heavy silence filled the room. Mark and Sandra stood awkwardly, clearly wanting to escape the tense atmosphere. I couldn't blame them. Look, I'm really sorry about all this. We had no idea, Mark said, sounding genuinely apologetic. Yeah, we just wanted a place to stay. We didn't know about everything, Sandra added, her eyes full of sympathy. I gave them a weak smile. It's not your fault. You were just looking for a home, I said. They offered to leave, but I insisted they stay. It wasn't their fault that Jake had dragged them into his deceit. After they left, I sat down on the couch, my mind racing. I felt betrayed, angry, and helpless. But amidst all those emotions, a fiery determination was taking shape. I wasn't going to let Jake walk all over me. The next morning, I called my lawyer and explained everything. He was shocked but promised to help me fight this. Don't worry, Emily. We'll make sure he doesn't get away with this, he assured me. I felt a small glimmer of hope. With my lawyer's help, I would fight for what was rightfully mine. Next, I knew I had to confront Jake at work. It wasn't going to be easy, but I needed to face him. I wanted him to know that I wasn't going to back down. I arrived at the office, my heart pounding as I walked through the halls. I could feel the eyes of my colleagues on me. They knew something was up. I knocked on Jake's office door and pushed it open without waiting for a response. Jake looked up, his face a mask of surprise and annoyance. Emily, what are you doing here? I'm here to tell you that I know everything, and I'm not going to let you get away with it, I said. my voice steady despite the turmoil inside. Jake scoffed. What are you going to do? You're sick, Emily. You should be resting, not causing a scene. I took a deep breath, steadying myself. I've spoken to my lawyer. We're going to fight you on the house, and I'm going to tell the bosses about what you've done. Jake's face hardened. You think you can scare me? Go ahead, tell them. See if I care. I met his gaze squarely. I'm not trying to scare you, Jake. I'm telling you what I'm going to do. You can't just throw me away because I'm sick. Jake leaned back in his chair, a smug look on his face. You really think you can win this? I'm not the bad guy here, Emily. I'm just trying to move on with my life. I felt a surge of anger. By selling our home? By leaving me with nothing? Jake shrugged. Life is tough, Emily. You should know that better than anyone. I shook my head, disgusted. I can't even recognize you anymore, Jake. You're not the man I married. Jake's expression didn't change. Maybe you never really knew me at all. With that, I turned and walked out of his office. I had said what I needed to say. Now it was time to fight. In the days that followed, my life turned into a whirlwind of paperwork, meetings, and strategy sessions. My health was improving, but my battle was far from over. With each passing day, I gathered more evidence to support my claim to the house. My lawyer was optimistic. Emily, you have a solid case. The numbers don't lie, and given the circumstances, it's unlikely a judge will side with Jake, he assured me over the phone. The relief I felt was palpable. Thank you, I replied. I appreciate your help more than you know. We're not there yet, but things are looking up, he cautioned. I understood. The legal world was unpredictable, but for the first time in a while, I felt like I was standing on solid ground. At work, the atmosphere was tense. My confrontation with Jake had become office gossip. Some colleagues whispered in corners, others offered quiet support. It was uncomfortable, but I couldn't let it distract me. I decided to meet with our bosses and lay everything out. It was a tough conversation, but necessary. I told them about Jake's betrayal, the house, everything. They listened, their faces a mixture of shock and empathy. We're so sorry, Emily. This is unacceptable, one of them said. The situation with Jake will be dealt with. This behavior can't be tolerated, the other added. Hearing their support was a relief. I didn't have to face Jake at work anymore. Days later, they called to tell me they had let Jake go. His actions didn't align with the company's values. It was a small victory, but it meant the world to me. My health was on the upswing. The treatments were working and my doctors were hopeful. It was a glimmer of hope in a sea of chaos. One evening, as I sat in my small rental, contemplating my next steps, my phone rang. It was Jake. I hesitated, but answered. Emily, please, we need to talk. He sounded desperate. What's there to talk about, Jake? I asked, my voice firm. I was wrong. I've been fired. I'm sorry, Emily. I didn't think it would come to this, he said, almost pleading. I took a deep breath. You hurt me, Jake, deeply. I can't just forget that. I know. I regret it. Can we find a way to settle this without going to court? He asked, sounding beaten. After a short pause, I replied, I will not back down. Never. There was silence on the other end. I understand. I'll have my lawyer contact yours, he finally said. Jake's call didn't change anything. He had shown his true colors, and there was no going back. I was a different person now, stronger and more determined. After the dust settled with the house and my divorce, I found myself standing at the beginning of a new chapter. It was a strange feeling, like stepping into the unknown after a long, turbulent journey. My health was improving, but the road to full recovery was still ahead of me. One afternoon, I was at the clinic for a checkup. The waiting room was quiet, just the hum of the air conditioner filling the space. When the nurse called my name, I followed her to the examination room. Dr. Simmons, my oncologist greeted me with a warm smile. Good to see you, Emily. How are you feeling? Better, thank you, I replied, taking a seat. That's what we like to hear, he said, going over my chart. Your latest scans show improvement. The treatment is working. I exhaled a sigh of relief. That's great news. Yes, but remember, it's a long road. You need to take care of yourself, he reminded me. I know, and I will, I assured him. Good. We'll keep monitoring your progress. Leaving the clinic, I felt a mix of emotions. Hope, certainly, but also a sense of responsibility. This was my life, and I had to take charge of it. Back at work, I threw myself into my projects. It was a distraction, but also a reminder that I had a purpose beyond my illness and personal troubles. One day, I was in the break room when I overheard a couple of colleagues talking. Did you hear about Jake? He's trying to get his job back, one of them said. Really? After what he did? Good luck with that, the other replied. I stayed silent, stirring my coffee. Jake's choices were his own. I had my path to follow, and it didn't include him. After work, I met up with my friend Sarah for dinner. She had been a rock throughout everything. How are you holding up? She asked as we sat down. I'm okay taking it one day at a time, I answered. That's all you can do, and hey, you're doing amazing, she said, offering a reassuring smile. I couldn't have done it without your support, I told her. We're in this together, she said, raising her glass. To new beginnings, I echoed, clinking my glass with hers. The next few months were a blend of routine and small victories. Each doctor's visit brought good news. My strength was returning, and with it, a newfound determination to live life on my terms. The treatments had worked, and the doctors were optimistic. I was officially in remission. As I walked into the office that morning, I felt a sense of pride. I had not only kept my job through the toughest times, but also excelled. My team greeted me with warm smiles and congratulations. The workday was busy, but I didn't mind. Being productive gave me a sense of normalcy. Later, I met Sarah for lunch. You look radiant, Emily, she said as we sat down at our favorite cafe. I feel it too, Sarah. It's like a new beginning, I responded, smiling. And you deserve every bit of it. So, what's next for you? She asked, sipping her coffee. I've been thinking about that. I want to give back. Maybe volunteer at the cancer center. Share my story. Help others, I said, the idea resonating with me more and more. That's wonderful, Emily. You'll be amazing at it, she encouraged. After lunch, I went for a walk in the park. The sun was shining and the air was fresh. I took a moment to sit on a bench and just breathe. Life was precious, and I was here, living it. As I walked back home, my phone rang. It was my boss, Mr. Thompson. Emily, good news. The board has approved your proposal for the new project, he said. That's fantastic. Thank you, Mr. Thompson. I won't let you down, I replied, excitement building up. I know you won't. Keep up the good work, he said before ending the call. Back at home, I reflected on my journey. From the shock of my diagnosis to the betrayal and divorce, it had been a roller coaster of emotions, but here I was, standing tall. I decided to write a blog post, sharing my story with the world. As I typed, the words flowed effortlessly. It was a story of pain, resilience, and ultimately triumph. When I hit publish, I felt a sense of liberation. My story was out there, and if it could inspire even one person, it was worth it.
I gave you everything, Zeke. My love, my trust, my father's legacy, and this is how you repay me? I gripped the damning photos in my shaking hands, the glossy images of my husband's infidelity blurring through my tears. It wasn't supposed to be like this. When Zeke and I first met, it was a whirlwind romance. He was charming, ambitious, and innovative, everything I thought I wanted in a partner. My father, the founder of our successful real estate development company, took an immediate liking to him. Zeke joined the company and quickly gained favor, his star rising as a brilliant architect. But as his reputation grew, so did his ego. Late nights, schmoozing clients at fancy dinners and exclusive clubs became the norm. When I expressed my concerns, Zeke dismissed them, claiming I didn't understand the demands of his job. I wanted to believe him, to trust that his heart remained true to me and our daughter, Violet. I was blind. Or maybe I just didn't want to see. The photos in my hands told a different story. There was Zeke, his lips locked with a young intern's at a company event. Natalie, her name was, pretty, ambitious, and clearly enamored with my husband. Mom? Violet's voice shook me from my thoughts. What's wrong? I hastily wiped my tears, but it was too late. She'd seen the photos scattered across my desk. It's your father, I managed, my voice breaking. He's been having an affair. Violet's face contorted with anger. What? With who? An intern? Natalie? That bastard! Violet slammed her fist on the desk. You have to confront him, Mom. This can't go on. I shook my head, fear gripping my heart. I can't. The scandal, the company. Your grandfather's health is declining. The stress could kill him. And what about the stress this is causing you? Violet demanded. He doesn't deserve your protection, Mom. Not anymore. Deep down, I knew she was right. But the thought of my carefully constructed world crumbling around me was paralyzing. The sound of the front door opening snapped me back to reality. Zeke was home, no doubt fresh from another late night at the office. I quickly gathered the photos, shoving them into a drawer. Violet glared as Zeke entered the room, his suit impeccable, but the scent of unfamiliar perfume clinging to him like a guilty verdict. What's with the long faces? He asked, his charm now seeming so false, so hollow. Before I could respond, Violet stepped forward, her eyes blazing with fury. How could you, Dad? How could you cheat on Mom, on our family, with some intern? Zeke's eyes widened, darting to me in panic. Stella, I can explain, but I held up a hand, silencing him. The pain in my heart had crystallized into something harder, sharper. Determination. No more lies, Zeke, I said coldly. No more excuses. You've made your choice. Now you'll face the consequences. I didn't know what those consequences would be yet, but one thing was certain. I would not let this man destroy everything my father had built, everything I had worked so hard to protect, even if it meant destroying him first. The next morning, I arrived at the office early, my mind still reeling from the revelation of Zeke's betrayal. As I walked through the halls, I overheard a conversation that stopped me in my tracks. I'm telling you, man, Zeke's got it made, a male colleague said. That new intern, Natalie, she's practically eating out of his hand. He said she's the reason he landed the Johnsons' project. Laughter echoed from the room. I bet she is. I heard they have a special bond, if you know what I mean. Rage boiled inside me. Not only was Zeke cheating, but he was using his affair to advance his career. I fought the urge to storm in and confront him, knowing I needed to play this smart. My phone buzzed with a text from Violet. Skipped school, following Dad, caught him bringing Natalie to the lake house, taking pictures now. My heart sank. The lake house was our family's sanctuary, a place filled with cherished memories. How dare he taint it with his sordid affair? I quickly replied, telling Violet to be careful and come home immediately. Then I made a decision. If Zeke wanted to play dirty, I'd dig up every speck of dirt on his precious Natalie. A few phone calls later, I had my answer. Natalie had a history of seducing married men at her previous jobs, using her charm to extract money, gifts, and favors. She was nothing but a gold-digging homewrecker. As I sat fuming in my office, my secretary knocked on the door, her face ashen. Mrs. Delaney, I'm so sorry. It's your father. He's had a heart attack. The world tilted beneath my feet. What? Is he? He's alive, but in critical condition. Your mother is with him at the hospital. I rushed to the hospital, my thoughts a tangled mess of grief, anger, and fear. When I arrived, my mother was in tears, clutching my father's hand as he lay unconscious, hooked up to beeping machines. Zeke burst in moments later, his face a mask of concern. Stella, I came as soon as I heard. How is he? I couldn't even look at him, my disgust threatening to overwhelm me. Like you care. You're probably just worried about your precious promotion. How can you say that? Zeke had the audacity to sound wounded. Your father is like a second dad to me. I love him. Spare me the act, Zeke. I know about Natalie. I know everything. Before he could respond, the doctor entered, his expression grim. I'm sorry, but Mr. Delaney has passed away. We did everything we could. The room spun. I collapsed into a chair, my mother's wails echoing in my ears. Zeke tried to embrace me, but I shoved him away, repulsed by his touch. The funeral was a blur. Zeke played the role of the grieving son-in-law to perfection, shaking hands and accepting condolences, but I caught him whispering to Natalie, their heads bent together conspiratorially. After the service, the family lawyer gathered us for the reading of the will. To everyone's shock, my father had named me the sole heir and CEO of the company. Zeke's face contorted with rage, his mask slipping. Violet squeezed my hand, her voice low. I told Grandpa about Zeke's cheating before he died. He wanted to make sure we were protected. Zeke cornered me after the lawyer left, his eyes blazing. This is absurd, Stella. You know I'm the one who should be running the company. You're not cut out for this. I stood my ground, drawing strength from my daughter's love and my father's trust. The only thing absurd here is your behavior, Zeke. You've lied, cheated, and betrayed this family. You're not fit to lead a dog on a leash, let alone this company. You're making a huge mistake, Stella, Zeke snarled. If you don't give me control, I'll ruin you. I'll destroy everything you hold dear. I looked him straight in the eye, my resolve unwavering. Bring it on, Zeke. You have no idea what I'm capable of. You want a war? You've got one. The first order of business was to remove Zeke from the company. I had him escorted from the building, his access revoked, and his email account terminated. The look of shock and fury on his face as security led him out was a small victory, but I knew it was only the beginning. Next, I called an emergency board meeting. Armed with the evidence of Zeke's affair and unethical business practices, I laid bare his betrayal. The board was stunned, but unanimously voted to support my decision to fire him. I thought I'd feel a sense of triumph, but all I felt was a hollow ache in my chest. The man I had loved, the father of my child, was nothing but a snake in the grass. Zeke wasted no time retaliating. He started calling our clients, spinning tales of my incompetence and instability. He even went to the media, painting me as a scorned, vengeful wife who couldn't handle the pressure of running a company. But his most vicious move came in the form of a lawsuit. Natalie, the intern he'd been sleeping with, filed a sexual harassment claim against the company. She alleged that I had created a toxic work environment out of jealousy and spite. I was served the papers in the middle of a client meeting. As I read the lurid accusations, my stomach churned with rage and disgust. This is all lies, I said through gritted teeth. Zeke is behind this. He's using her to get back at me. My lawyer, a fierce woman named Olivia, placed a comforting hand on my shoulder. We'll fight this, Stella. Zeke and Natalie won't get away with it. But the damage was done. The lawsuit hit the news, and suddenly, our company was synonymous with scandal. Clients started pulling their projects, investors backed out, and our stock prices plummeted. I was drowning, barely keeping my head above water as I fought to save my father's legacy. Violet, my rock through it all, refused to let me give up. We'll find a way to beat them, Mom, she said, her eyes blazing with determination. We just need to fight fire with fire. Late one night, as I pored over legal documents and financial reports, Violet burst into my home office. Mom, look what I found. She thrust her phone into my hands, a series of texts displayed on the screen. I read them quickly, my heart pounding. They were messages between Zeke and Natalie detailing their plan to take over the company and force me out. I hacked into Dad's old phone, Violet explained. He never changed his password. There's more, Mom. Natalie's pregnant. She's claiming it's Dad's baby, but I think it's all part of their scheme. I felt sick to my stomach. Zeke's cruelty knew no bounds. He was willing to use an innocent child as a pawn in his twisted game. We need to expose them, I said, my voice shaking with anger. We need to show the world what kind of monsters they really are. Violet nodded, a fierce smile on her face. I have an idea. The annual company gala is coming up. What if we confront them there, in front of everyone? We can present the evidence, expose their lies, and watch them crash and burn. It was a risky plan, but I was out of options. Zeke and Natalie had backed me into a corner, and I was ready to come out swinging. Let's do it, I said, my resolve hardening. Let's take those bastards down. As I hugged my daughter close, I felt a flicker of hope amidst the darkness. Zeke had underestimated me, underestimated the strength of a mother's love and the power of the truth. He wanted a war. He was about to get one hell of a battle. The night of the gala arrived, and I was a bundle of nerves. Violet and I had spent weeks gathering evidence, piecing together the sordid details of Zeke and Natalie's scheme. We had bank statements, recorded conversations, and a damning trail of emails that painted a clear picture of their deceit. I smoothed my hands over my dress, a sleek black number that made me feel powerful, armored. Violet squeezed my hand as we entered the ballroom, the glittering chandeliers and elegant decor, a stark contrast to the ugliness we were about to expose. Zeke was holding court in the center of the room, Natalie draped on his arm like a trophy. They were all smiles and charm, working the crowd with their lies and manipulation. I took a deep breath, steeling myself for the confrontation. With Violet by my side, I approached the stage, the evidence clutched tightly in my hands. "Ladies and gentlemen, may I have your attention, please?" My voice rang out over the din of conversation, and the room fell silent. Zeke's eyes narrowed as he saw me, his jaw clenching with anger. Natalie's smile faltered, a flicker of fear crossing her face. "I have something important to share with all of you tonight," I continued, my heart pounding in my chest. The truth about Zeke Delaney and Natalie Summers. I held up the stack of documents, my hands shaking slightly. These are records of their affair, their conspiracy to defraud this company and steal my family's legacy. They've been lying to all of us, manipulating and scheming for their own gain. The room erupted in gasps and murmurs. Zeke's face turned an ugly shade of red, his fists clenched at his sides. "This is ridiculous, Stella," he spat. "You're just a bitter, jealous woman who can't handle the fact that I've moved on. Those documents are forgeries, lies." Natalie nodded, her eyes wide with false innocence. "She's crazy. I'm just an intern. I would never do something like this." But I wasn't finished. "There's more," I said, my voice steady. "Natalie is pregnant. She's been claiming the baby is Zeke's, using it as leverage to force me out of the company." Zeke blanched, his mouth falling open in shock. Natalie's hand flew to her stomach, her eyes darting around the room in panic. "That's not true!" Zeke shouted, his voice cracking. "The baby is mine. Stella is just trying to turn everyone against me." I shook my head, a mirthless smile on my face. "Oh, really? Then how do you explain these text messages detailing your plans to use the pregnancy to extort money from multiple men?" I held up my phone, the damning texts displayed on the screen. The crowd gasped, their faces a mix of shock and disgust. "And as for the paternity of the baby," Violet chimed in, "we have DNA test results proving that Zeke is not the father. Natalie has been playing all of you, just like she played my dad." The room exploded into chaos. Zeke lunged for me, his face contorted with rage, but security held him back. Natalie collapsed to the floor, sobbing and wailing about how she'd been set up. The police arrived moments later, handcuffs at the ready. As they led Zeke and Natalie away, reading them their rights, I felt a weight lift from my shoulders. It was over. The truth had prevailed, and my father's legacy was safe. I turned to Violet, tears streaming down my face. "We did it, baby. We won." She hugged me tightly, her own tears mingling with mine. "I'm so proud of you, Mom. You're the strongest person I know." As the guests began to disperse, whispering and gossiping about the night's events, I knew that the road ahead wouldn't be easy. There would be more battles to fight, more wounds to heal, but for now, I savored the victory, the knowledge that I had faced my demons and emerged stronger, wiser, and more determined than ever. Zeke had tried to break me, to shatter everything I held dear. But he had underestimated the power of a woman's resilience, the unbreakable bond of a mother and daughter united against all odds. And that was a mistake he would regret for the rest of his miserable life. The fallout from the gala was immediate and intense. The news of Zeke and Natalie's arrests spread like wildfire, plastered across every newspaper and gossip site in the city. The company was inundated with calls from reporters, investors, and clients demanding answers. I spent hours in meetings with the board, lawyers, and PR teams, trying to control the narrative and minimize the damage. It was exhausting, but I refused to let Zeke's actions destroy everything we had built. Violet was my rock through it all, keeping me focused and grounded. She even took on some of the media responsibilities, giving interviews and statements with a poise and maturity far beyond her years. "You're amazing. You know that?" I told her one evening, as we sat in my office, surrounded by stacks of paperwork. "I couldn't do this without you." She grinned, her eyes sparkling with mischief. "Well, Someone has to keep you in line, Mom. Can't have you going all scorned woman on us again. I laughed, feeling lighter than I had in weeks. I think I'll leave the dramatics to the soap operas from now on. But our moment of levity was short-lived. The next day, I received a call from the prison where Zeke was being held. Mrs. Delaney, this is Warden Johnson. I'm afraid I have some bad news. Your husband was found dead in his cell this morning. It appears to be a suicide. I felt like I'd been punched in the gut. For all his flaws and betrayals, Zeke had once been the love of my life, the father of my child. The thought of him taking his own life, alone and desperate, was almost too much to bear. Violet found me in my room, staring blankly at the wall. Mom, what's wrong? I told her the news, my voice hollow and distant. She sat beside me, her arms wrapped around my shoulders as I wept. I'm so sorry, Mom, she whispered. I know you loved him, despite everything. I nodded, my tears soaking her shirt. I did. God help me, I did. But I also hated him for what he did to us, to the company. I don't know how to feel. You don't have to know, Violet said softly. You're allowed to grieve, to be angry, to feel however you need to feel. But don't let his choices define you, Mom. You're so much stronger than that. Her words were like a beacon in the darkness, guiding me back to shore. I hugged her tightly, marveling at the incredible young woman she had become. The funeral was a small, somber affair. I stood beside Violet, holding her hand as we watched the casket being lowered into the ground. Natalie was there, her belly swollen with her lies, her face a mask of crocodile tears. I felt a flicker of pity for her, mixed with a simmering rage. She had been a pawn in Zeke's game, but she had also made her own choices, her own mistakes. She would have to live with the consequences, just as I would. As the mourners dispersed, I caught a glimpse of a familiar face in the crowd. It was Olivia, my lawyer, her expression grim. Stella, I need to talk to you, she said, pulling me aside. It's about Zeke's death. The police found a note in his cell addressed to you. My heart seized in my chest. What did it say? Olivia hesitated, her eyes filled with concern. He claimed that you drove him to it, that you ruined his life and left him no choice. He's trying to make you responsible, even in death. I felt a white-hot anger surge through me, mingled with a sickening dread. Even from beyond the grave, Zeke was still trying to manipulate me, to twist the truth to suit his own ends. He's not going to win, Olivia, I said, my voice low and fierce. I won't let him destroy me, not anymore. I'm going to fight back, with everything I have. Olivia nodded, a glimmer of admiration in her eyes. I know you will, Stella, and I'll be right there beside you, every step of the way. As I walked away from the cemetery, Violet's hand clasped tightly in mine. I knew that the battle was far from over. Zeke's final act of cruelty had opened up a new front in the war, one that threatened to consume me from the inside out. But I also knew that I had the strength, the courage, and the love to prevail. I had my daughter, my company, and the truth on my side. And that was a force that even death itself could not defeat. 1 year later, I stood at the podium addressing a room full of journalists and industry leaders. The company had not only survived the scandal, but thrived under my leadership. We had expanded into new markets, taken on innovative projects, and cemented our reputation as a force to be reckoned with. But the road to recovery had been long and painful. In the wake of Zeke's death and the revelation of his final cruel message, I had been besieged by media attacks and legal challenges. Natalie, desperate to save herself, had tried to paint me as a ruthless, vindictive woman who had driven her poor, innocent lover to suicide. It was a narrative that some were all too eager to believe. I faced accusations, investigations, and even death threats from those who bought into Zeke and Natalie's lies. But I refused to back down. With Violet and Olivia by my side, I fought back against every false claim, every attempt to smear my name and my company. We dug deeper into Zeke and Natalie's past, uncovering a trail of deception and manipulation that stretched back years. We found other women Zeke had targeted, other companies he had tried to infiltrate and destroy. We exposed Natalie's history of extortion and fraud, revealing the true depths of her cruelty and greed. Slowly but surely, the tide began to turn. The media started to question Natalie's credibility, to see through the cracks in her story. The legal challenges against me were dismissed, one by one, as the evidence of my innocence mounted. And then, the final blow. Natalie's web of lies unraveled completely when it was revealed that the child she had claimed was Zeke's had actually been fathered by another married man she had been scheming against. She was arrested and charged with multiple counts of fraud and extortion. As I watched her being led away in handcuffs, I felt a sense of grim satisfaction. She had thought she could destroy me, could use my pain and grief as a weapon against me. But she had underestimated the strength of a woman who had already lost everything and survived. Violet, now a successful artist in her own right, had channeled her own pain and anger into her work. Her pieces, raw and powerful, had garnered critical acclaim and sparked important conversations about toxic masculinity and the resilience of women. "I'm so proud of you, Violet," I told her, as we celebrated her latest exhibition. "You've taken the darkest moments of our lives and turned them into something beautiful, something meaningful." She hugged me tightly, her eyes shining with tears. "I learned from the best, Mom. You showed me what it means to be strong, to fight for what's right, no matter the cost." I smiled, feeling a sense of peace and purpose that had eluded me for so long. "We've both come so far, haven't we? Sometimes I can hardly believe it." "Believe it, Mom," Violet said, her voice filled with conviction. "We're survivors, you and me. We're unbreakable." As I looked out over the city skyline, the sun setting in a blaze of orange and gold, I knew she was right. Zeke and Natalie had tried to break me, to shatter my world into a million pieces. But I had taken those pieces and rebuilt myself, stronger and more resilient than ever before. I had my daughter, my company, and the knowledge that I had faced the worst that life could throw at me and emerged victorious. I was a survivor, a fighter, a woman who had claimed her power and her truth. And I knew, with a certainty that burned bright in my soul, that nothing and no one could ever take that away from me again. As I stepped down from the podium to a standing ovation, I caught Violet's eye in the crowd. She grinned at me, her fist raised in a gesture of solidarity and triumph. "Here's to the future, Mom," she mouthed, her eyes sparkling with pride and love. I raised my own fist in return, feeling a rush of gratitude and joy that brought tears to my eyes. Here's to the future indeed, a future that we had fought for, that we had earned, that we had claimed as our own. A future that belonged to us and us alone. The courtroom was packed, the air thick with tension and anticipation. Zeke and Natalie sat at the defendant's table, their faces pale and drawn. They had been denied bail, deemed a flight risk after the extent of their crimes had been revealed. I sat in the front row, Violet and Olivia beside me. We had spent months preparing for this moment, gathering evidence and testimony, yet building an airtight case against the two people who had nearly destroyed our lives. As the judge entered the room, I felt a shiver run down my spine. This was it, the moment of truth, the final reckoning. The prosecutor, a sharp-eyed woman named Valerie, laid out the case against Zeke and Natalie with ruthless efficiency. She detailed their schemes, their lies, their callous disregard for the lives they had ruined. She called witness after witness, each one painting a damning picture of greed, manipulation, and betrayal. Former employees, clients, even some of Natalie's other victims, they all took the stand, their voices shaking with anger and pain. And then it was my turn. As I walked to the witness box, I felt a rush of nerves and adrenaline, but I also felt a sense of clarity, a deep conviction in the truth of my words. I told my story from the beginning, the love, the trust, the dreams that Zeke and I had shared, the slow, insidious unraveling of our marriage as his ego and ambition consumed him, the devastating discovery of his affair, his betrayal, his cruelty. I spoke of the battle to save my company, my father's legacy, from their clutches, the lies, the smears, the legal challenges that had nearly broken me. But I also spoke of the strength I had found in my daughter, in my friends, in the power of the truth. As I finished my testimony, I looked directly at Zeke and Natalie, my eyes blazing with a fierce, righteous anger. "You thought you could destroy me," I said, my voice ringing out clear and strong. "You thought you could take everything I had, everything I loved, and crush it beneath your feet. But you were wrong." Zeke's face twisted with rage, his fists clenched at his sides. Natalie's eyes darted around the room, searching for an escape, a way out. "I am not the weak, broken woman you thought I was," I continued, my voice rising with each word. "I am a survivor, a fighter, a mother who would move heaven and earth to protect her child. and I will not rest until justice is served, until you pay for every last one of your crimes." The courtroom erupted in applause, the sound washing over me like a wave. I looked over at Violet, tears streaming down her face, her eyes shining with pride and love. The judge called for order, his gavel banging against the bench. And then, the moment we had all been waiting for. In the case of the state versus Ezekiel Delaney and Natalie Summers, on the charges of fraud, embezzlement, and conspiracy, the jury finds the defendants guilty on all counts. The words hit me like a thunderbolt, a shock of joy and relief that brought me to my knees. Violet and Olivia were there in an instant, their arms around me, their tears mingling with my own. I watched as Zeke and Natalie were led away in handcuffs, their faces contorted with shock and disbelief. They had thought themselves invincible, untouchable, above the law and the consequences of their actions. But they had been wrong. They had underestimated the power of justice, the strength of a woman's will, the unbreakable bond of a mother and daughter united against all odds. As I walked out of the courtroom, my head held high, my heart filled with a fierce, unshakable joy, I knew that this was only the beginning. There would be more challenges ahead, more battles to fight, more wounds to heal. But I also knew that I had the strength, the courage, and the love to face them all. I had my daughter, my company, and the knowledge that I had faced the worst that life could throw at me and emerged victorious. I was a survivor, a fighter, a woman who had claimed her power and her truth. And nothing, not even the darkest of demons, could ever take that away from me again. 5 years later, I stood on the balcony of my new office, overlooking the city skyline. The sun was setting, casting a warm golden glow over the buildings and streets below. It was a moment of quiet reflection, a chance to take stock of how far I had come. The company had thrived under my leadership, growing and expanding in ways I had never dreamed possible. We had taken on new challenges, new projects, new frontiers, and emerged stronger and more successful than ever before. But it wasn't just the business that had flourished. Violet had blossomed into an incredible young woman, her artistic talent and passion taking her to new heights. She had just opened her first solo exhibition, a stunning collection of pieces that explored themes of resilience, healing, and the power of the human spirit. As I looked out over the city, I felt a sense of peace and contentment that had eluded me for so long. The wounds of the past had healed, the scars faded into a distant memory. I had found a new sense of purpose, a new lease on life, a new reason to wake up every morning with a smile on my face. And yet I knew that I could never forget the lessons I had learned, the battles I had fought, the strength I had found within myself. Those experiences had shaped me, molded me into the woman I was today. A woman who knew her own worth, her own power, her own unbreakable spirit. A knock on the door startled me from my thoughts. I turned to see Olivia, a smile on her face, a file in her hand. "Sorry to interrupt, Stella, but I thought you should see this," she said, handing me the file. I opened it, my eyes scanning the pages, my heart skipping a beat. It was a report from the parole board detailing Zeke and Natalie's latest hearing. "They were denied," Olivia said softly. "The board cited their lack of remorse as their continued attempts to manipulate and deceive. They'll be staying behind bars for a long time to come." I felt a rush of emotions, relief, sadness, a twinge of pity for the broken, twisted souls they had become. But I also felt a sense of closure, a final chapter in the story of our shared past. "Thank you, Olivia," I said, my voice steady and strong, "for everything you've done, for standing by me through it all. I couldn't have made it without you." She smiled, her eyes shining with warmth and affection. "You give yourself too little credit, Stella. You're the strongest, most resilient person I know. You've overcome more than most people could even imagine." I hugged her, feeling a rush of gratitude and love for this woman who had been my rock, my anchor, my unwavering supporter through the darkest of times. As she left the office, I turned back to the balcony, my eyes drawn to a small framed photo on the wall. It was a picture of my father, his face beaming with pride and joy, his arm around a much younger version of myself. I felt a pang of grief, a moment of longing for the man who had been my guiding light, my North Star, my constant source of love and support. But I also felt a sense of deep, abiding gratitude for the legacy he had left me, the values he had instilled in me, the strength he had helped me find within myself. "I miss you, Dad," I whispered, my fingers tracing the outline of his face. "But I know you're always with me, always watching over me. And I promise I'll make you proud. I'll honor your memory every single day." As I stepped back from the photo, I felt a sense of renewed purpose, a fire burning bright in my heart. I had been through hell and back, had faced the worst that life could throw at me, and emerged stronger, wiser, and more determined than ever before. I was a survivor, a fighter, a woman who had claimed her power and her truth, and I knew, with a certainty that blazed like the sun, that nothing could ever hold me back, ever again. I smiled, my eyes fixed on the horizon, my heart filled with hope and possibility. The future was mine, and I was ready to face it, head-on, with all the strength and courage of a true warrior.
When my friend Benjamin told me that he had sold the house my father had left me for $660,000, I was completely taken aback. He called from the hospital with a stunning happiness in his voice as he broke the news. To my further surprise, he disclosed that he was taking a trip with his mistress. I found the whole situation to be utterly ridiculous, and I found it difficult to comprehend Benjamin's reasoning behind making such a decision about a place that was so meaningful to me. In addition, he said nonchalantly that he planned to move away from his family, which included his daughter Nancy. I was profoundly offended by Benjamin's lack of concern for his daughter, about whom he grumbled that she was growing increasingly conceited and bothersome. I was furious at his callous remarks about his child. I was angry and disbelieving at the same time as I struggled to process the confusing news of the property sale and his plans to leave his family. I thought I would lose my sense of reality. I had to intervene to prevent Benjamin from recklessly selling the house. I'm Carol, a 39-year-old stay-at-home mom. My life has become more and more difficult with my spouse Benjamin and our 9-year-old daughter Nancy. A year or so of persistent suspicions about Benjamin's infidelity have contributed to the rising discord in the marriage. His habits, such as going out late at bars, coming home smelling odd, and purchasing pricey gifts that weren't for me, alarmed me even though I didn't have any concrete evidence. However, I've been too afraid to approach him about his potential affair, which has prevented me from acting decisively. When I think back on our relationship, the Benjamin I fell in love with 11 years ago comes to me. I was first drawn to him by his warmth and sincerity, and our marriage began happily. But things really started to go south when Nancy turned 1. Being a full-time homemaker, parenting proved to be more demanding, and I required Benjamin's assistance with meals and showers. He felt irritated as these duties became commonplace and eventually stopped being an active dad. He started to argue that since I was a stay-at-home mother, I should be responsible for taking care of the kids. Benjamin was always making bitter comments, and he would frequently withdraw into our bedroom and leave Nancy and me alone. There was less of him interacting with Nancy as he grew more distant. He dismissed her, saying he was too busy and that playing was my job, even on his days off. Nancy was often reprimanded by Benjamin for crying, and he blamed my parenting for any problems that arose rather than taking into account her feelings. We would frequently withdraw to our room and play alone in order to shield Nancy from his hurtful remarks. It hurts to witness how our once content marriage has descended into such tension and turmoil, with me having to deal with these issues mainly on my own. Living with my daughter Nancy meant that I rarely had time for me, even when I felt like I needed some alone time for hobbies like reading or watching movies. Benjamin was frequently pursuing his love of auto racing in the meantime. We were dependent on his salary, so even though it felt unjust, I was hesitant to express my displeasure. Throughout the 9 years of our marriage, this feeling of helplessness and irritation had been steadily increasing. Benjamin's harsh language and lack of interest in parenting had become distressingly common. It was a far cry from the considerate and loving man I had married. Despite these difficulties, I realized that we had to keep things stable for Nancy's sake, because our income was reliant on Benjamin's work. Nancy complimented my artistic abilities and suggested I sketch my career one afternoon while we were painting together. Nancy, in contrast to my own restrained disposition, had developed into a straightforward, joyful, and honest girl, even in the face of Benjamin's frequent dismissive attitude. Seeing her succeed in school, gain popularity among her peers, and become a teacher's favorite was encouraging. Her praise for my drawings gave me more self-assurance and pride, since it showed me how much she appreciated and noticed the work I had put into them. Her optimism, which shone light on our family's difficult dynamics, was something I treasured. Nancy's ability to make me grin gave me the strength to tackle the recurring difficulties. But our home life took a usual turn for the worse that evening. After drinking, Benjamin passed out in the living room. His drinking had grown more and more concerning. A piece of paper dropped out as I was succeeding in taking off his jacket. It was a motel receipt, an unequivocal and devastating affirmation of my long-held concerns regarding his adultery. "Hide my inner agony, please." I slipped the receipt onto a shelf and went to bed, wondering how I would tell Benjamin what I had discovered the following morning. I was left alone with my thoughts in the middle of my daily tasks when Benjamin, who was barely sober, departed the home before Nancy went to school. It became more and more difficult to keep up the facade of a happy relationship or to deny the truth when the motel receipt was discovered. Although I knew something needed to happen, I was intimidated by the road ahead. I had to talk to Benjamin immediately, expecting an admission, maybe an apology. Over the next few days, as I was buried in these thoughts, I was startled out of my meditation by the abrupt vibration of my smartphone. I became anxious when I saw a strange number flash on screen. The caller identified themselves as a member of the General Hospital personnel when I reluctantly answered. They told me that Benjamin had been sent to the emergency department in a hurry and was currently having surgery to treat a serious kidney condition. Benjamin's condition was grave, the doctor indicated, and a kidney transplant might be necessary. I listened as the doctor explained the seriousness of the surgery and the requirement for a transplant, feeling overwhelmed by this abrupt turn in our lives. I felt myself not wanting to lose Benjamin that night, even if his mockery and infidelity had hurt me. While I thought about the scary prospect of his operation, I held on to the optimism that he would recover. The hunt for a prospective kidney donor got underway over time. I was, rather unexpectedly, the ideal fit. Our story took on a deeper complexity when it became clear that, despite our tense relationship, I could save Benjamin. Benjamin's parents became involved as well, adding to the complexity of the situation. Though they were elderly, they were quite concerned. I had to balance the chance of a restored relationship through this life-saving act against our tumultuous past when deciding whether or not to donate a kidney. Despite my imperfect health, Benjamin had no siblings, and our matched blood types made me the most appropriate donor. Admittedly, I had serious reservations about undergoing the surgery. However, the overriding importance of preserving Benjamin's life helped me overcome these hesitations. Recognizing the irreplaceable value of his presence, I decided to proceed as his kidney donor. When I discussed Benjamin's condition and our upcoming surgery with Nancy, she responded with understanding and encouragement. She stayed with my in-laws during my hospitalization. Despite their health issues, they were able to care for her. Nancy enjoyed a close bond with her grandparents, and knowing she was in good hands provided me with immense relief. With that peace of mind, I underwent the kidney transplant surgery, which surprisingly was completed more quickly than I had anticipated. I spent about a week in the hospital while Benjamin needed 8 days to recover. Thankfully, there were no complications, and both of our recoveries proceeded smoothly. Just before I was due to be discharged, my phone rang, sending a shiver down my spine. I answered the call, bracing myself for another unexpected twist. As I spoke to Benjamin, who had just received my kidney, I expected words of thanks for the life-saving donation and asked about his recovery. But the conversation took a shocking turn. In an unsettlingly cheerful tone, he revealed that he had sold our house for $660,000 and was planning a trip with his mistress. I was stunned by the news. It felt like a lightning strike. That house wasn't just any property. It was a cherished inheritance from my father, now thoughtlessly sold off. Benjamin's brazen announcement that he also had a mistress added another layer of shock. In my state of disbelief, I asked about our daughter's welfare, only to be met with his cold indifference. He said he didn't care and was planning to leave her behind. This revelation left me both enraged and appalled. The idea that he would sell the house and abandon his daughter was incomprehensible. Determined to take action, I realized I had to prevent Benjamin from rashly giving up our home. As our call ended abruptly, I was left in a whirlwind of emotions, grappling with his shocking decisions and figuring out how to protect our home and Nancy's future. Struggling to grasp the reality of Benjamin selling our house while he was still in the hospital, the stress worsened my condition, leading to an extended hospital stay. Feeling helpless and distressed, I lay in the hospital bed for days, pondering my next moves. My first instinct was to reach out to Nancy. Without the house, we would have nowhere to live. Despite my anger at Benjamin for his audacious actions and his affair, my primary concern was for Nancy's well-being. I decided to call her at my in-laws' house, where she answered the phone. I anxiously asked Nancy how she was coping and if she felt lonely, especially with the news of our house being sold by her dad. Her response was unexpectedly reassuring. She calmly informed me that she had managed to handle the situation, explaining that her dad had instructed his mistress to sell the house. Nancy's mature handling of this surprising turn of events left me both surprised and proud. She reassured me that everything was fine and expressed her gratitude for my concern. Encouraged by Nancy's composed demeanor, I felt a bit of peace settle within me. However, curiosity about what was currently happening with Benjamin and his mistress lingered. Reminding myself of the need for rest, I allowed sleep to take over. After 4 days of recovery, I was discharged from the hospital and made my way to my in-laws' house. Upon arrival, Nancy greeted me with joy, and my mother-in-law welcomed me back with a gentle smile, expressing her happiness. In contrast, my father-in-law's expression was grim as he apologized for Benjamin's actions. I was baffled at how Benjamin could stray so far from the values instilled by his wonderful parents. Despite their apologies, I acknowledged that perhaps I should have spoken up sooner. As we talked, my in-laws expressed their determination not to let Benjamin have his way. Intrigued and somewhat anxious, Nancy and I decided to head home. However, on our way, we encountered an unexpected scene in front of a realtor's office. There, we saw a disheveled Benjamin and an unknown woman, presumably his mistress, engaged in a heated argument. Benjamin, dressed in sweatpants and with unkempt hair, appeared visibly distressed. His mistress, wearing a short skirt and only one high heel, looked frustrated as she complained about the house not being sold and a canceled purchase deal of $660,000. The chaotic scene unfolded before us, adding another layer of complexity to our already tumultuous situation. Benjamin's angry gestures and his mistress's loud complaints drew shocked looks from passers-by. Nancy and I, equally surprised, approached them seeking an explanation. Upon questioning Benjamin about his actions, he and his mistress were visibly taken aback, gasping in surprise. Accusations flew immediately, with Benjamin suggesting that I must have talked the buyer out of the deal. Dismissing their baseless claims and instinctively protecting Nancy behind me, I stood firm, ready to address the mess that had unfolded. I stood firm against their accusations, deeply troubled by the unfolding drama. The realtor, caught in the middle of this chaos, reacted with disbelief upon discovering that I was Benjamin's wife. The cancellation of the house purchase had thrown a wrench in their plans. Benjamin, pointing at his mistress, admitted he still had debts from the money he had lavishly spent on her. It slowly dawned on me that Benjamin intended to sell the house to settle these debts and secure a new place for them both. The realization washed over me like a harsh wave. Benjamin knew full well that the house was a precious inheritance from my father, and yet he was willing to disregard Nancy and me in his scheme to seize my most valuable asset. My anger surged as I confronted him. Despite the tense situation, he continued to hurl insults, displaying a shocking lack of decency. I challenged his audacity to sell my house without my consent, emphasizing that I was the rightful owner. My anger grew as I questioned whether he had gone as far as forging documents to facilitate the sale. Subsequently, I disclosed an unexpected development. Benjamin had been disparaging the alleged purchasers of the house without realizing that they were his parents. Nancy had told my in-laws about Benjamin's wrongdoings, so she was the one who broke the news to them. My in-laws, furious at their son's behavior, had made the decision to intervene and defend their cherished granddaughter as well as their daughter-in-law. Nancy firmly went up to tell us that her grandparents were aware of the house's importance to us and were against its quick sale. They had cleverly feigned to be the first people to purchase the house. Desperate and defeated, Benjamin let out a foul laugh and yelled at Nancy and her grandparents upon discovering this falsehood. But Nancy did not lose her composure in the face of his verbal abuse. I responded by taking a piece of paper out of my backpack and shoving it under Benjamin's nose, prepared to present him with proof. The complicated dynamics of families and the extent people will go to in order to protect those they love were brought to light by the drama that was developing. I swung the divorce papers around and said with determination, "I want a divorce." Benjamin scoffed and snorted, not understanding the seriousness of the issue and making me wonder if I could survive without him. I was unmoved by his haughtiness and determined to refute his incorrect beliefs. I sat back and told Benjamin that I had a plan, determined to break through his delusions. "Never fear," I said. "I'm going to receive a lifetime present from your parents," and revealed that his parents were stepping in to make sure Nancy and I would be taken care of, in spite of everything. This decision was about more than just dissolving a marriage. It was about ensuring Nancy and I would have a secure future. I recently announced that I had received a sizable pre-in. Benjamin and his mistress were clearly taken aback by the inheritance gift. I clarified that my in-laws made the decision to give me a portion of their money as soon as possible due to their health concerns. My in-laws made it apparent that they felt I deserved the generosity more, especially because I had given them a treasured granddaughter than Benjamin, who I had initially assumed may benefit from it. They were disappointed with Benjamin because, Despite their having facilitated a life-saving organ donation, he had not shown gratitude. I accepted the present with gratitude, feeling lucky to have received such kindness. Benjamin was obviously distressed by this choice. He appeared pale and uneasy. He was fiercely against the agreement, calling it unethical and dishonest, and he even threatened to sue. But I calmly explained that our parents had made a completely logical decision and that his current predicament was the result of his financial irresponsibility. I also openly questioned if he could really afford the legal fees, given his track record of reckless spending. I confronted him more directly and told him that I was going to demand every penny because of child support and emotional pain. I told him quite bluntly that I would do whatever it took to make sure he did what he had to do. Benjamin apologized profusely, but it was obvious that it was too late. He was overcome with regret. I made it clear to him that I would not back down from getting even for the abuse and disregard he had given me and our daughter Nancy. A realtor who had witnessed the entire discussion thanked me for managing the unpleasant issue well as Benjamin and his mistress swiftly departed the area. Even though it was tense, the settlement was essential to maintaining accountability and respect within our family. Once any misconceptions had been resolved, I was prepared to welcome a fresh start. Nancy, my daughter, and I strolled home together while holding hands. Her smile gave me more courage as she thanked me for standing up for her. I silently vowed to keep her safe at all times. The divorce from Benjamin went through without any problems, ending a long-term unhappy marriage. It ended abruptly, which surprised me and made me consider why I had put up with so much for so long. It turned out that Benjamin had borrowed a lot of money to finance his extramarital activities and had wasted a sizable sum of money on his affair. Eventually, his mistress walked out on him, unable to handle his unstable finances. Meanwhile, Benjamin experienced hurdles in his career. Due to a lack of materials, his company had to make layoffs. One of the first people let go from the factory was Benjamin. Even though it was regrettable for him, it was likely that Benjamin was among the employees let go by the company due to subpar work or behavior, which may have included his behavior at home. Benjamin, who was now unemployed, made ends meet by doing part-time jobs and didn't take the initiative to look for a full-time job. Having lost his wife, career, and lover, his life seemed hopeless. Benjamin had taken my sacrifices for granted, even though I'd gone to the lengths of donating a kidney to him in the past. It appeared that he was finally being dealt with by karma, therefore he should concentrate on paying off his debts. Using the resources I acquired from my in-laws, I ventured into illustration in the interim, turning a new leaf. Initially motivated by Nancy's compliments on my drawing abilities, I got encouraging responses from customers who appreciated how careful and proficient my work was. I want to keep working hard to give Nancy and myself a better life, and I also want to grow my clientele. This new chapter was a proactive move toward a prosperous future, as well as a healing from previous traumas.
The dining room table was set for 4, the soft glow of candlelight illuminating the carefully arranged place settings. I took a deep breath, savoring the aroma of the roasted chicken and fresh herbs wafting from the kitchen. This was supposed to be a quiet family dinner, a chance to reconnect after Dane's latest business trip, but the sound of the front door slamming open shattered the tranquil atmosphere. "Where are you?" Dane's gruff voice echoed through the hallway. I stepped out of the kitchen, my heart sinking at the sight of his disheveled appearance and the scowl etched on his face. "The kids will be down any minute. What's going on?" He thrust a manila envelope at me, his eyes cold and unforgiving. "I want a divorce, Alara. It's over." The words hit me like a physical blow, stealing the air from my lungs. Divorce? After 17 years of marriage, countless sacrifices, and 3 beautiful children, He was ready to throw it all away, Dad? Meredith's trembling voice came from the top of the stairs. Dane whirled around, his jaw clenched. You're coming with me. I'm taking custody. What? No. I stepped between them, shielding Meredith from his rage. You can't just waltz in here and demand that. Watch me. He sneered, towering over me. You think a judge is going to grant custody to a part-time gallery worker? I'm the breadwinner, the one with the means to provide for her. Callie and Ian emerged from their rooms, eyes wide with fear at the commotion. Dane's tirade was tearing our family apart, right before their eyes. Stop it! I cried, my voice thick with emotion. You're scaring the children. He leaned in, his breath hot against my face. Wake up, Alara. This is the real world. And in the real world, money talks. You've got no chance against me. In that moment, something shifted inside me. The fear and heartbreak gave way to a simmering rage, fueling a determination I didn't know I possessed. I would not let this man destroy my family any longer. We'll see about that, I said, meeting his gaze with unwavering resolve. With trembling hands, I packed a small suitcase, trying to muffle the sound of my sobs. Meredith's cries echoed from the other room, tearing my heart to shreds. How could Dane do this to our family? Mom, please don't go. Callie clung to me, her face streaked with tears. I pulled her into a tight embrace. I don't have a choice, honey, but I promise I'll fight for us to be together again. Ian stood in the doorway, clutching his favorite stuffed animal, his eyes wide and frightened. Where are we going? We're going to stay with Grandma for a little while, I said, forcing a reassuring smile. Dane appeared, his face like stone. Time's up, let's go. I turned to Meredith, her slender frame racked with sobs as she clung to the doorframe. Mom, don't leave me. Please. Dane grabbed her arm, yanking her away. That's enough. You're coming with me. No. I lunged forward, but Dane shoved me back, his strength overpowering me. Stay out of this, Alara. She's mine now. He dragged a screaming Meredith down the hallway, her anguished cries piercing my soul. I sank to the floor, my body numb with shock and grief. How had everything fallen apart so quickly? At my mother's house, Agnes pulled me into her arms, her gentle touch a balm for my broken heart. I'm so sorry, sweetheart, but you can't give up. You have to fight for your children. Her words ignited a spark of determination deep within me. Dane thought he could trample all over me, but he was wrong. I would burn his world to the ground if that's what it took to get my family back. Over the next few weeks, I consulted lawyers, trying to find someone who could help me gain leverage against Dane's wealth and power. Finally, I met with Mrs. Green, a sharp-tongued attorney with a reputation for taking on tough cases. Your husband is a real piece of work, she said, flipping through the stack of papers detailing Dane's misdeeds. Embezzlement, fraud, tax evasion, he's been a busy boy. My heart raced. Can you use this against him, in the custody case? Mrs. Green fixed me with a steely gaze. This is the kind of ammunition we need, but are you prepared for the fallout? He won't go down without a vicious fight. I thought of Meredith's anguished cries, of Callie and Ian's confusion and heartbreak. Dane had torn our lives apart without a second thought. It was time for him to face the consequences. I'm ready, I said, my voice resolute. Let's take him down. I stared at my reflection in the bathroom mirror, barely recognizing the woman staring back at me. Dark circles ringed my eyes, a testament to the sleepless nights spent agonizing over Meredith's absence. But I couldn't afford to crumble, not now, not when so much was at stake. With a deep breath, I steeled my resolve and headed to the art gallery, where I'd agreed to pick up a few shifts. Keeping busy was the only way to stay sane during this living nightmare. Alara, is that you? I froze at the familiar voice, turning to see Tom, an old friend from college, standing behind the counter. Tom, what are you doing here? He grinned, that same mischievous smile I remembered from our younger days. I own this place now. Well, co-own it with my wife. But enough about me. What's going on with you? You look like hell. The words tumbled out before I could stop them, the pain and anger I'd been bottling up finally finding release. I told him everything. Dane's sudden demand for divorce, the custody battle, the evidence Mrs. Green had dug up about his shady business dealings. Tom's expression hardened, his jovial demeanor replaced by a steely resolve. That son of a bitch. He's not getting away with this, Alara. Not on my watch. What do you mean? He leaned in, his voice low. I've got connections. People who can dig up dirt on your scumbag ex. If he thinks he can just waltz in and destroy your family, he's got another thing coming. A glimmer of hope kindled in my chest. After weeks of feeling powerless, I finally had an ally in my corner. You'd do that for me? Tom placed a reassuring hand on my shoulder. Of course. We've been friends forever, and friends don't let friends get screwed over by low-life dirtbags like Dane. Over the next few days, Tom's network of informants went to work, uncovering a trail of evidence that painted a damning picture of Dane's business practices. Embezzlement, tax evasion, even whispers of an affair, it seemed there was no depth to which he wouldn't sink. Each new revelation was like a dagger to my heart, but it also fueled my determination to bring him down. This man, who had once sworn to love and cherish me, had become a stranger, a monster willing to sacrifice everything for his own greed and ego. "We've got him," Tom said, sliding a thick manila envelope across the table. "Everything we need to bury that bastard in court." I flipped through the documents, my hands trembling. Photos of Dane with another woman, bank statements detailing his financial crimes. It was all there, laid out in black and white. "Thank you," I whispered, my voice thick with emotion. "I don't know how I'll ever repay you." Tom's expression softened. "Just promise me one thing. When this is all over, you'll find a way to be happy again. You and those kids deserve a fresh start, away from that toxic son of a bitch." I nodded, determination burning in my chest like a wildfire. "Don't worry. By the time I'm through with Dane, he'll be the one begging for mercy." The envelope felt like a lead weight in my hands as I approached Dane's house. My heart pounded in my chest, a mix of anxiety and anticipation coursing through my veins. This was it, the moment I'd been waiting for, the chance to expose Dane's deceit and fight for my family. The door swung open, and there he stood, his expression a mask of arrogance. "Alara, what a surprise! We need to talk." I brushed past him, entering the house that had once been my home, now a cold and unfamiliar place. "What's this about?" Dane crossed his arms, his tone laced with impatience. I took a deep breath, steadying my nerves. "I know what you've been up to, Dane. The embezzlement, the affairs, all of it." His eyes widened, but he quickly regained his composure, letting out a derisive laugh. "You're delusional. You have no proof." With trembling hands, I opened the envelope, spreading the damning evidence across the coffee table. Bank statements, photographs, everything Tom had uncovered. Dane's face drained of color as he stared at the incriminating documents. "Where did you get these?" "That's not important." I met his gaze, my voice unwavering. "What's important is that I have everything I need to take you down in court. You're not going to win this custody battle, Dane. Not after the judge sees what a lying, cheating scumbag you really are." His nostrils flared, his hands clenching into fists. "You think this is a game, Alara? You have no idea what you're up against." "Don't threaten me." I took a step closer, my anger rising like a tidal wave. "You're the one who threw our family away like it was nothing. You're the one who broke Meredith's heart and made our children cry. And now you're going to pay the price." Dane's jaw tightened, his eyes burning with fury. "This isn't over. Not by a long shot." As he stormed out of the room, I allowed myself a small smile of satisfaction. The mighty Dane Moore was finally starting to crack, and I was the one holding the hammer. Later that night, as I tucked Callie and Ian into bed at my mother's house, I felt a sense of peace wash over me. For the first time in weeks, I didn't have to hide the truth from my children or put on a brave face. "Mom?" Callie's voice was soft, her eyes wide with concern. "Are you and Dad getting a divorce?" I took her hand, giving it a gentle squeeze. "Yes, honey, but it's for the best. I promise. Your dad, he's done some things that have hurt our family, things that can't be forgiven." Ian crawled into my lap, his small arms wrapping around my neck. "Are we going to be okay?" I pressed a kiss to the top of his head, my heart swelling with love for these two incredible kids. "Of course we are. We have each other, and that's all that matters. No matter what happens, I'll always be here for you both. Always." As they drifted off to sleep, I allowed a few tears to spill down my cheeks. This battle had taken an immense emotional toll, but seeing the way my children looked at me, with trust, with love, made every sacrifice worth it. Dane might have money and power, but he would never have what truly mattered, a family who loved him unconditionally. And in the end, that would be his downfall. Mrs. Green's office was a sleek, modern space, but the weight of the upcoming custody battle hung heavy in the air. I sank into the chair across from her desk, my hands trembling slightly as I clutched the thick file containing the evidence against Dane. "You look nervous," she observed, her piercing gaze missing nothing. I forced a tight smile. "Can you blame me? This is everything. My whole future with my kids hangs in the balance. Which is why we need to be prepared for anything." Mrs. Green rifled through the documents, her brow furrowing. "Your husband is a real piece of work. The affairs, the financial crimes, he's left quite the paper trail." "So you think we have a strong case?" She fixed me with a pointed look. "I think we have the ammunition to bury him. But Dane isn't going to go down without a vicious fight. He's got money, connections, he'll throw everything he has at trying to discredit you." My stomach twisted into knots at the thought. After everything Dane had put me through, I couldn't bear the idea of losing my children, too. "What do I need to do?" I leaned forward, my voice laced with determination. "I'll do whatever it takes." Mrs. Green's expression softened ever so slightly. "Stay strong. Don't let him rattle you, no matter what underhanded tactics he tries. The truth is on our side. We just need to make sure the judge sees it that way." A few days later, Dane and I met for a mediated discussion, our respective lawyers in tow. As I entered the room, my breath caught in my throat at the sight of Meredith sitting beside her father, her eyes hollow and haunted. The ache in my heart was physical. "Alara," Dane greeted me with a cold sneer. "I see you've brought your pitbull of an attorney, ready to admit defeat." Before I could respond, Mrs. Green stepped forward, her presence commanding. "I'd watch my tone if I were you, Mr. Moore. We have more than enough evidence to expose your illicit activities." Dane's face flushed crimson, his hands clenching into fists. "You lying." "Dad, stop!" Meredith's voice cracked like a whip, cutting through the tension. "Just stop." We all fell silent, stunned by her outburst. Meredith had always been the quiet, reserved one. To see her stand up to her father like that was shocking. Dane turned on her, his eyes flashing with rage. "How dare you speak to me that way? I'm your father, and you'll show me some respect." "Respect?" Meredith's laugh was bitter, devoid of humor. "Why should I respect someone who tore our family apart, who made my little brother and sister cry, who cheated on Mom and treated her like garbage?" Her words hit Dane like a physical blow, and for a moment the mask of arrogance slipped, revealing the ugly truth beneath. A man consumed by greed and ego, someone who valued power over his own family. As we left the mediation, Mrs. Green pulled me aside, her expression grim. "He's unraveling. Dane knows his actions are indefensible, and it's making him sloppy, reckless." I glanced over at Meredith, still trembling from her confrontation with her father. "Did you see the way she stood up to him? My little girl is finally seeing him for who he truly is." A sad smile tugged at Mrs. Green's lips. "Then let's make sure her bravery wasn't in vain. It's time to take this bastard down once and for all." The courtroom was packed, the air thick with tension as Dane and I took our seats on opposite sides of the aisle. I could feel his glare boring into me, but I refused to meet his gaze, focusing instead on the 3 empty chairs where my children should be sitting. "All rise for the Honorable Judge Reynolds." As the judge entered, my heart hammered in my chest. This was it, the moment that would decide the fate of my family. I glanced over at Mrs. Green, who gave me the slightest of nods, a silent reassurance that we were ready. The proceedings began with Dane's lawyer painting a picture of him as a dedicated father and successful businessman, someone who could provide lavishly for his children. I fought the urge to scoff out loud. Finally, it was our turn to present our case. Mrs. Green wasted no time in getting to the heart of the matter, systematically laying out the evidence of Dane's misdeeds. Bank statements, photos, even testimony from former business associates. Dane's smug expression slowly crumbled as the weight of his lies and betrayals was laid bare for all to see. By the time Mrs. Green finished, his face was ashen, his hands clenched into tight fists. "Would you like to take the stand, Mr. Moore?" The judge's voice was even, giving no hint of her thoughts on the revelations. Dane opened his mouth, no doubt prepared to spew forth more lies and excuses. But before he could speak, a quiet voice cut through the courtroom. "Don't bother, Dad. We already know the truth." her eyes shining with unshed tears. My breath caught in my throat as she made her way to the witness stand, her slender frame trembling slightly. "Your Honor, I'd like to say a few words, if I may." The judge nodded, and Meredith took a deep breath, steadying herself. "For years my father has lied to us, to my mother, to my siblings, to everyone around him. He's cheated, stolen, and manipulated his way through life, caring only about himself and his own greed." Her voice wavered, but she pressed on, her gaze finding mine across the courtroom. "But my mom, she's the strongest person I know. She's the one who held our family together while Dad was off doing God knows what. She's the one who dried our tears and made us feel safe, even when everything was falling apart around us." Tears streamed down Meredith's face, but her words were laced with a strength and resilience that made my heart swell with pride. If anyone deserves to have us in their lives, it's her. Not the man who treated us like afterthoughts, who saw us as possessions to be won or lost. A hush fell over the courtroom as Meredith stepped down from the stand, her words hanging heavy in the air. Dane stared at her, his expression unreadable, before dropping his head into his hands. In that moment, I knew we had won. Dane's carefully constructed facade had crumbled, laid bare by the heartfelt words of his own daughter. He was a broken man, undone by the very family he had sacrificed for his own selfish desires. As the judge called for a recess, Mrs. Green pulled me into a fierce hug, her eyes shining with triumph. "You did it, Alara. You fought for your family, and you won." I clung to her, my body trembling with a heady mix of relief and elation. The battle had been long and brutal, but in the end, love and truth had prevailed. And as I looked toward the future, I knew that no matter what challenges lay ahead, my children and I would face them together, a united front stronger than ever before. The courtroom was deathly silent as Judge Reynolds re-entered, her gaze sweeping over the crowd. I felt Meredith's hand slip into mine, her slender fingers trembling with nervous anticipation. This was it, the moment we'd been fighting for. After careful consideration of the evidence presented, the judge began, her voice ringing out in the hushed chamber, "I hereby award full custody of Meredith Moore, Callie Moore, and Ian Moore to their mother, Alara Moore." A collective gasp rippled through the room, but I barely heard it over the roaring in my ears. We'd won. Against all odds, against Dane's wealth and power, we had won. Meredith threw her arms around me, her body shaking with relieved sobs. I held her close, pressing my face into her hair as tears streamed down my cheeks. My babies were coming home. Across the aisle, Dane sat frozen, his face ashen and drawn. As our eyes met, something flickered in his gaze, a glimmer of shame, of regret, before the shutters slammed closed once more. "This is an outrage!" His lawyer leapt to his feet, his voice booming through the courtroom. "You can't possibly think this woman is fit to raise those children." "That's quite enough." Judge Reynolds fixed him with a stern look. Mr. Moore's actions, his infidelity, his financial crimes, his utter disregard for his family have made it abundantly clear that he is not only unfit to retain custody, but a detriment to his children's well-being. Dane opened his mouth, no doubt poised to unleash another torrent of lies and excuses. But one withering glance from the judge silenced him, his shoulders slumping in defeat. As we stepped out into the courthouse lobby, a tremor of disbelieving joy rippled through me. We were free, free from Dane's tyranny, free to start fresh and rebuild the family he had so callously torn apart. Callie and Ian barreled into my arms, their faces alight with happiness. Mrs. Green stood off to the side, a proud smile tugging at her lips. "I can't thank you enough," I murmured, overcome with gratitude for the woman who had helped make this impossible dream a reality. She waved a dismissive hand. "Don't mention it. Seeing that pompous ass taken down a few pegs was thanks enough." A commotion at the entrance drew our attention, and we turned to see Dane emerging, his immaculate suit rumpled and his tie askew. A cluster of reporters swarmed him, shouting questions and snapping photos as he tried in vain to shield his face. "Mr. Moore, is it true you embezzled millions from your company? Care to comment on the allegations of infidelity? How does it feel to lose everything, your job, your money, your family?" Dane froze, his eyes finding mine through the chaos. For a fleeting moment the mask slipped, revealing the broken man beneath. A man who had sacrificed everything for greed, and now had nothing left. As the reporters closed in, their flashing cameras blinding him, Dane did the only thing he could. He turned and ran, disappearing into the crowd like a disgraced phantom. I watched him go, a strange sense of pity mingling with my vindication. He had brought this reckoning upon himself, and now he would have to live with the consequences of his actions. But as I looked at my children, their faces aglow with joy and relief, I knew that his punishment paled in comparison to the reward that awaited us, a fresh start, free from the shackles of his toxic influence. A new chapter was beginning, one written in love, resilience, and the unbreakable bonds of family. And this time, I held the pen. The warm summer breeze carried the scent of freshly mown grass as I watched Callie and Ian chase each other across the backyard, their laughter ringing out in the peaceful afternoon. A contented smile tugged at my lips. This was the life I had fought so hard for, the simple moments of joy that Dane's toxicity had nearly stolen from us. "Mom?" Meredith appeared in the doorway, her expression pensive. "Can we talk for a minute?" "Of course, sweetie." I patted the spot beside me on the porch swing, and she sank down onto the weathered wood with a sigh. For a long moment she was silent, her gaze trained on the horizon as if weighing her words carefully. Finally she spoke, her voice little more than a whisper. "Do you ever wonder what might have happened if things had been different? If Dad hadn't—" She trailed off, but the unspoken words hung heavy in the air. If he hadn't lied. If he hadn't cheated. If he hadn't torn our family apart with his greed and selfishness. I reached out, taking her hand in mine and giving it a gentle squeeze. "Meredith, what your father did was unforgivable. He hurt us in ways that can never be undone, but dwelling on the past, on what might have been, will only breed more pain and resentment." Tears glistened in her eyes, and for a moment I saw the frightened little girl who had watched her world crumble before her. "I know he's a terrible person. I know he didn't deserve us, but I can't help missing the man he used to be, you know? Before all of this happened." My heart ached for her, for the innocence she had lost far too soon. Pulling her into my embrace, I stroked her hair, remembering all the nights I had rocked her to sleep as a baby. "It's okay to mourn the person he once was, sweetie. What your father became. That's on him, not you. You did nothing wrong." Meredith nodded, sniffling softly as she clung to me. In that moment, I felt a profound sense of gratitude. Gratitude for her resilience, for her unwavering strength throughout this entire ordeal. "I'm so proud of you, you know that?" I murmured, pressing a kiss to the top of her head. "You stood up to him when it mattered most, even when it was hard. You helped me fight for our family." A watery smile curved her lips. "We're a team, right? The four of us against the world. Always." As Callie and Ian bounded up the porch steps, sweaty and breathless from their games, I pulled them all close, reveling in the warmth and love that radiated from my little tribe. We had been through hell and back, but we had emerged on the other side, battered but unbroken. Later that night, as I tucked them into bed, I couldn't help but reflect on the long, arduous journey that had led us here. The lies, the betrayal, the agonizing custody battle, it had all been a crucible, testing the bounds of our love and resilience. But in the end, we had passed that test with flying colors. Dane's selfishness and greed had nearly destroyed us, but it had also revealed an unshakable truth, that our family was built on a foundation stronger than any force he could wield against us. As I drifted off to sleep, surrounded by the peaceful sounds of my children's breathing, I felt a sense of contentment wash over me. The future was a blank canvas, filled with endless possibilities and the promise of new beginnings. And this time, I held the brush, ready to paint a masterpiece of love, hope, and unbreakable family bonds that would endure long after the scars of yesterday had faded away.